Hey everybody, my name's Marcel Ernie Racing News. Looking at this article by Ron Seymour from the day after Remembrance Day 2021. Kelowna's official Remembrance Day service was called off in part for fear of anti-vaxxers would disrupt ceremonies. They showed up anyway. Quote, "We were worried, to be honest, that something like this would happen," Legion President John Cashin said after a group of 75 to 100 anti-vaxxers disrupted an informal and unpublicized November 11th service at the Cenotaph in City Park. Quote, "It's one of the reasons why we didn't have our regular service in City Park. We thought maybe they'd show up and start hollering, 'Those people are nuts.'" For the traditional November 11th service to go ahead, Legion officials had considered spending about $10,000 on perimeter fencing and security around the Cenotaph Plaza. But Legion officials decided in the end the expense was too great and canceled the formal service. Nevertheless, the informal service did take place at 11 a.m. on Remembrance Day, but it was disrupted by when a woman used the microphone to address the crowd. Now I wonder if it's an informal Remembrance Day not put on by the Legion because they needed fences to keep the unvaxxed outside. They wanted to spend the poppy money on fencing and security to keep the unvaccinated people out of Kelowna's City Park. How ironic. So who is this woman? And who put on the event? Who supplied the sound equipment? Who advertised putting on their own Remembrance Day because the Legion has forgot the past and is condemned to repeat it? Ernie Racing News, let's get into it.
So there is a section under the Criminal Code, I thought I might be asked, and the section is that under section 176, sub 2 and sub 3, I would allow you to take a look if you so desire, but basically that section relates to the obstruction or violence or an arrest of an officiating clergyman is what it says. However, in the subsections I'll read to you. Everyone who willfully disturbs or interrupts an assemblage of persons met for religious worship or for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose is guilty of an offense punishable by summary conviction. And I take it that this may have occurred yesterday, and that's the objective as our investigation. It may also be that they simply committed a bylaw offense or some other provincial statute that we would look at, or frankly nothing. This is the objective what we're looking at. I think the public deserves answers as to what happened and are expecting the RCMP to investigate that.
A little while ago, we had a meeting with the Crown Prosecutor, and the Crown always does this. They try and get you to plea bargain or negotiate. And Linda steadfastly said, "No, I'm not plea bargaining on anything. I haven't broken the law. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to plea bargain." So the prosecutor,
is that true?
Yes,
said it was that meeting that caused him to go back and look at the file. I don't think he had looked at it very good up until that point, but he went and looked at it, and he said from that point forward he started to realize they didn't really have a case and that she had excellent defenses. But that took almost 2 years. That she had to go through dozens of appearances in court, dealing with them, disclosure hearings, dealing with media who were lying and trying to disobey court orders and so on. And ultimately, she ended up winning. So Linda, come on up. She's going to tell you a nice little story.
And the happy dance.
That will inspire everybody.
Yahoo! Way to go, Linda! Are you doing a happy dance first?
Just want to echo what David and Ted and Lloyd have said about having these rallies once a month, I have to agree with them that it's a good thing to do this at least once a month. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this opportunity to come up here today and talk to you guys and tell you my story. And all of us have an opportunity to share our wins and our struggles at these rallies once a month. So, you know, I hope we're able to keep doing this.
We will.
You betcha. Another thing I want to say is, unlike Lloyd and Ted, I am not a speaker. I'm a writer. And I wrote a lot. So bear with me.
You got 15 minutes.
Okay, so April of 2022, the corrupt RCMP and BC Prosecution Services approved this criminal charge against me for what happened on Remembrance Day 2021. I'll just read what the charge is. It's 176, Section 2, disturbing religious worship or certain meetings. Everyone who willfully disturbs or interrupts an assemblage of persons met for religious worship or for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. On Tuesday, November 28, 2023, 5 days before my trial was to begin, the charges were stayed. And in legal terms, what that means is they were canceled or terminated. So I've had to wait 2 years to tell this story because, as David Lindsay had wisely advised me, everything you say can and will be held against you. How many of you were there 2 years ago? Anybody? How many of you heard about it on the news? Right? Let me tell you something. What you witnessed, if you were there, what you saw on the news, what actually happened, and what I had originally planned are 4 completely different things. Did any of you see this poster that was used to advertise my planned Remembrance Day ceremony? So, a couple, right? Okay. If you didn't see it, then I don't know what prompted you or the other 1,000 people to go there when it was widely advertised that there would not be a formal ceremony. But that's precisely why, the reason why I organized my ceremony. So, see this man? I keep losing my place here. See this man pictured on the poster? This is not some random picture we got off the internet. This is Charles Beauregard, Leo's uncle. He was shot and killed in the line of duty over Germany in World War II. Let me read what the poster says. Remembering our heroes, Pilot Officer Charles Beauregard, honoring the brave men and women who fought for our country. Let's continue to fight for freedom in honor of those who gave their lives for us. We will not forget. November 11th, 2021, 11 a.m. Kelowna City Park Cenotaph, 1600 Abbott Street, Kelowna, BC. Meet at the Cenotaph for a moment of silence. Veterans and loved ones are invited to share their stories. That was the poster that was advertising my ceremony that day. So, for the first time, Leo had planned to publicly honor his uncle's sacrifice by reading a short summary of his life. But our ceremony was desecrated by a bunch of veterans.
Hey, lady, take a look at these. Hey, climb up. This is not the day.
Veteran once said,
They ask you for
You
your
have to find a better time, lady.
They have already forgotten.
Not the right time, not the right place.
I believe that
How freaking dare you? You're a disgrace.
Shame on you for doing that.
I'm fighting for the freedom that our soldiers died for. Have you forgotten? You have forgotten. You have forgotten. A veteran said, if they ask you for your papers, we've already.
Why don't you fuck it off?
Oh, yeah.
Time for you to
Get the
go.
hell out of
My
here.
uncle died in the war.
You came here to tell people
He got
to
shot
bugger off?
over Germany.
That
I have a
has
right to be
nothing
here
to
as
do
well.
with this.
Yeah,
Has
and
nothing
we're
to do
honoring
with
him.
this.
You have the right to be here, but not this bullshit.
This is not bullshit.
This is
Of
not
course it's
bullshit.
bullshit.
This is exactly what our
Ask the people
soldiers
here if
died
it's bullshit or
for.
not.
Go away.
Freedom.
Go away.
And the sound system was unplugged before he got a chance to speak. So I think Charles's short story is worth telling again. Uncle Charles was born in 1916 in Corval, Saskatchewan, to a family of 9 kids. He started off his military career as a Rocky Mountain Ranger in 1940. He then enlisted with the Royal Canadian Air Force in Vancouver in 1942 at the age of 26. He got his Air Gunner's badge in 1943 and then headed overseas. He joined the 101 Squadron on April 6, 1944. On May 21st, he was appointed pilot officer. 2 days later, he was functioning as a special wireless operator on a Lancaster bomber when his plane was shot down in Dortmund, Germany. The pilot survived, but the crew didn't make it. On his obituary, it stated that he wanted to be a pilot and was prepared to die for God, country, friends, and family. Thank you for your sacrifice, Uncle Charles. We'll make sure it's not in vain. I had organized a peaceful, respectful ceremony, and when I arrived at the cenotaph, I was delighted to see a bagpiper, a bugler, a guy with a guitar who wanted to sing the anthem, and some other guy who wanted to read the exhortation poem. Each of these guys had shown up individually for the same reason I had, to pay our respects on Remembrance Day. But let me just back up a bit. When I heard that the official ceremony had been canceled for the 2nd year in a row, I was mad. I figured the authorities didn't want people to remember the freedom that our soldiers died for. I decided to write a short speech to read before I was going to invite the audience to use the mic and share their stories. My speech was about wars and deceit, recognizing the enemy, the cost of doing battle, and joining God's army. It was only a couple of days prior to November 11th that, as I was listening to the radio in the truck, a veteran was being interviewed about the upcoming Remembrance Day ceremony in West Kelowna. He was speaking nonchalantly about how people who wanted to attend had to be masked, vaxxed, show their vax pass, and practice social distancing. I thought, holy cognitive dissonance. Does everybody know what cognitive dissonance means? Okay, if you don't, it's when you believe in 2 contradictory ideals because it's either too painful or too scary to make a choice between the 2. You can't believe that you live in a free country and believe that it's okay for governments to force you to be subjected to a medical experiment in order to participate in society. So I decided to add that information at the beginning of my speech, and that turned out to be a fateful decision, to say the least. This crowd is amazing. Thank you all for making a point of coming here today. This is obviously not a conventional Remembrance Day ceremony. because our city and local Legion have dropped the ball. The West Kelowna Legion, however, is hosting a Remembrance Day ceremony. You want to know how they're showing their appreciation for the freedom our soldiers died for? People want to attend have to be double vaxxed, show their vax passes, wear a mask, and practice social distancing.
Get out of there! Get away! Ridiculous!
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is political!
the levels of cognitive dissonance have shot through the roof.
Get out of there! Not the place you
A
want!
veteran once said,
Those people that attacked me on Remembrance Day were suffering from cognitive dissonance. They didn't want to face the ugly truth that fellow veterans across Canada were being denied entry to their own Remembrance Day ceremonies. Kent Mulgat from Kelowna Now and Dan Cooch, the cameraman from Global News, were both there to get the footage they used to distort the story for their hit pieces. Let me set the record straight. I was not an anti-vaxxer there to disrupt anything and complain about government mandates. Although the resistance were demonized by the media, there was not one single protester in the crowd. I waited respectfully behind the cenotaph as the impromptu ceremony unfolded. And the ceremony was over before I approached the mic.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left to grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
which was part of my sound equipment that we had set up. I also want to point out that Bruce was simply videotaping the ceremony when he was verbally attacked by the most obnoxious, ignorant excuse for a human being that I have ever seen, also known as Diaper Dave, the dude who's always stalking our rally.
You want another racist tirade, you scumhead? Go spout your racist shit elsewhere! How dare you! How dare you be here! Get off the cenotaph!
It is not
This is not the place for you!
It's not about you. It's
Not about you! Get out of here!
What are you talking to me for? I'm a camera guy.
I thought I smelled something when I got here, Bruce.
I'm a camera guy.
Get her off of there! Get her off!
The psychopath.
While Leo was physically assaulted by an incompetent commissioner named Ronaldo Bacalod, who is now a bylaw officer.
Get her off! Get her the hell off!
Hey, buddy, that's assault. You're assaulting him. You want me to call
No, I've been calling RCMP. Oh, he actually assaulted me. He pushed me.
I saw you assault me. I saw you kicking.
I got it all on camera.
Can you please tell me your name?
94222.
94222. Okay. So I didn't appreciate what you did the previous time. So I looked up the rules and we went down to the city hall.
You know, you're
It
not
says-
trying to harass me.
The RCMP believed the edited media footage like it was the gospel and completely ignored Bruce's footage that showed everything that had happened. Because of corrupt officers like Adam McIntosh, the incompetent inspector, Leo was fired from his job.
That I believe that there were a group of people that were gathering for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose, and they were interrupted. And I believe that interruption was potentially criminal in nature.
And because of Corporal Michael Carruth, whose pathetic investigation led to me being charged, I fully support David Lindsay's attempts to have the RCMP removed from our province and replaced with a local police force. Now, the upside of getting charged, however, is you're entitled to this thing called disclosure, which is all the evidence they have against you, including the statements from all the disruptors. In the summer of 2022, I was finally able to piece together what actually happened that day. And I got to see how effectively the propaganda campaign had controlled these people's minds. And I got to see firsthand how easily they can be triggered. You know, the individuals who desecrated my ceremony, if their hearts hadn't been filled with such hatred for their fellow man, it would have been a wonderful, spontaneous, organic collaboration between total strangers, members of the community who wanted to honor Remembrance Day. Sadly, all these people had forgotten what it was they were supposed to be remembering. And while the cops were busy protecting the disruptors, we did continue our ceremony without the sound system that the RCMP forced us to shut down.
How do they do it every other Remembrance Day?
I've asked you politely. There's no amplified sound.
How have they done it in the past?
I'm in front of you, please don't yell in my face.
Pardon me?
I'm in front of you, don't yell in my face. Please take down.
Then answer my question.
How did they do
How do they communicate at the previous Remembrance Days without amplification?
music? Speakers are not being used.
That's a crime.
I did read the rest of my speech, and several people did come up to speak and tell their stories. Media didn't show you any of that, did they? Our freedom fighter friend, Mark Gonksy, is a veteran who was not welcome at the Peachland Legion's Remembrance Day service because he wasn't vaccinated and wouldn't wear a mask. So he was happy when I invited him to speak at my ceremony. And he did end up reading a powerful speech. He recited the poem In Flanders Fields and emphasized the last verse.
Start with Mark today and just line up if you'd like to come up here and tell your story. This day is about you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, fellow veterans. A little bit about myself. I was a petty officer in the Canadian Navy from 1980 to 1988, back when the Russians and the Soviet Union was still together. So I can tell you I sailed in the same waters as communist fleets against us. We were still at war with them back in the day when they still had their finger on the trigger. I'd like to start by reading a little poem by John McCrae. It's called In Flanders Fields. And if you listen to the last verse of it, it's very telling for all of us in the freedom movement. For some reason my fingers aren't working.
People that left had very little respect for a man like you speaking right now.
Thank you.
That's right.
In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely sing and fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. the torch.
He said, bury the torch, people.
We're here today to honor the hundreds of thousands of Canadian men and women who served in Canada's military. Some giving everything, some coming home to live a life of horror, seeing the death and destruction of war for the rest of their lives, and of course the many who will never return and made the ultimate sacrifice. Lest we not forget, I've heard this phrase all my life. First Remembrance Days as a child, a teenager, and for 8 years in the Navy. And since then I've attended remembrance services in Halifax, Ottawa, Victoria, and many places in between. I also in the North Sea, North Atlantic, and serving with NATO in 1982. Lest we forget, I thought this was cast in stone. Never again would we let tyranny, racism, segregation, corruption rule the world. And here we are today. I'd also like to quote a brother veteran who was rejected from a local legion, as I was.
Wow.
And I quote, "If you have to show papers to attend a Remembrance Day ceremony or Legion, you've already forgotten."
Right on.
We're surrounded by communism and tyranny. Communism is say, prove it. Well, let's look at the writings of Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto and the father of communism. Just some of the major points he talked about, and I quote, "Communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and morality. Instead of constituting them on a new basis, it therefore acts to contradict all past historical experience. And to add to that, if you fail to learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it."
Yes.
That's where we are today, folks.
Yeah.
After World War II, in 1947, the Nuremberg trial started, and they established the Nuremberg Code that Canada was part of as an allied country. Again, just a few of the relevant codes that came forth from that trial. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. Absolutely. The voluntary consent of the human without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, or any other form of constraint or coercion. The experiment should be concluded so as to avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering and injury. And all you have to do is go onto the CDC website. This is their website, and check out the VAERS, the Vaccine Reporting System. Don't believe me. Please, don't believe me. Look it up yourself.
Exactly.
There are other regulations put forth in the Nuremberg Code, and I encourage everyone to Google them if they haven't already been fact-checked. Where does this country go from here? I encourage everyone here to stand for freedom and our God-given rights. If you don't stand up now, your children will be crawling to survive in the future. Honor our veterans, our fallen comrades. Fight back. Enough is not enough. We need to take back power from the politicians, media, medical bureaucrats, and corporate puppet masters above them. Support your first responders. Support your police officers. Thank you. Your firefighters, your doctors, your nurses, because a lot of them are with us. We the people support you. And I'd like to close on this note. Never surrender your rights and freedoms. Veterans won them for us. They paid with their lives. Let's honor them, lest we forget.
Thank you. Right on.
which needs to remain on every freedom fighter's mind as this war wages on. Let me remind you what the last verse says. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. This poem gets read every year at Remembrance Day ceremonies. Now let me read what was written in the Daily Courier on November 12, 2021, the day after my ceremony was desecrated. This story by MSM Prostitute reporter Ron Seymour was based on Kelowna Legion President John Cashin's comments. I don't know if you can see this picture, but look at this sad picture. All these veterans wearing masks. So, Kelowna's official Remembrance Day service was called off, in part, for fear anti-vaxxers would disrupt ceremonies. They showed up anyway. We were worried, to be honest, that something like this would happen. Legion President John Cashin said, after a group of 75 to 100 anti-vaxxers disrupted an informal and unpublicized November 11th service at the Cenotaph and City Park. Quote, it's one of the reasons why we didn't have our regular service in City Park. We thought maybe they'd show up and start hollering, those people are nuts. For the traditional November 11th service to go ahead, the Legion officials had considered spending about $10,000 on perimeter fencing and security around the Cenotaph Plaza. But Legion officials decided in the end the expense was too great and canceled the formal service. So that's what they were going to use the funds from the poppy sales for. To keep out the undesirable second-class citizens of Kelowna, including veterans, who didn't agree to participate in a medical experiment. I do not donate money for poppies anymore. You know what? The evidence they had against me on November 28, 2023, when they stayed the charge, was no different than the evidence they had against me on April 13, 2022, when they publicly announced the charge. The authorities wanted to scare me, to make an example out of me. They wanted to play a game of chicken with me, and I ran them off the road. I called their bluff. David Lindsay was there by my side, guiding me every step of the way, and helped me to represent myself. I never talked to a lawyer. And after 18 appearances in court over 17 months, not to mention all the other administrative obligations, do you want to know what it cost me financially to defend myself? A big fat zero. Because I refused to pay extortion fees to prove my innocence. So this is a big win for me and the freedom movement. But my fight is far from over. The Crown could change its mind and relay the charge anytime in the next year. In the meantime, Leo and I have filed 2 civil lawsuits relating to Remembrance Day. And my Corruption and Accountability Task Force, aka me, David, Leo, and Bruce, are going to continue to expose corruption and demand accountability. So a big thank you to David, Bruce, Leo, and all of you for your support and prayers these past 2 years. Ultimately, God wins. So just one more thing before I go. I promised Bruce that I would do my happy dance if he showed up today. Okay, so here goes. I fought the law and I won. I fought the law and I won. There you go. Thank you.
Well, I hope you guys learned a lot. This is a perfect example with Linda Jackson, the RCMP, the Crown, the prosecutor, and political motives. It's such a parallel what Linda Jackson had to go through and what I have been going through with Constable Conrad Erbs. We both had our charges stayed just days before trial by the Crown prosecutor. They wait to the last minute, so you have to do all your work to prepare for court because court is coming. So you got to prepare your cross-examination, all your questions, you got to prepare all of the data. And not only that, in preparation, you have to be nervous for almost 2 years about this charge hanging over your head. And I'm actually still waiting on another court date with Constable Erbs. The difference is Linda was charged criminally in the criminal courts of Canada, and I was dealing with Erbs and bylaw, Erbs under, the Motor Vehicle Act and Motor Vehicle Act regulations. And of course, he sued me in small claims court, which was thrown out by Judge Tam because Erbs' investigational skills as an RCMP officer are exactly the same as he is in with his research into how small claims does not deal with libel and slander. So it goes to show you what the force is hiring these days. He couldn't even read on the front page that you can't sue for libel and slander. But anyways, back to what we just watched. I mean, Linda made all of the appropriate points. Remembrance Day is about remembering not the fallen soldiers specifically, but about why the fallen soldiers died. Why are these soldiers being remembered? What did they fight for, or what did they think they were fighting for? It's not just Remembrance Day for the fallen soldiers. It's about the purpose behind it all. And what came from that later on was the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to protect us, the same as the U.S. Constitution, to protect our right for peaceful assembly, our right to association. And the Nuremberg Code on top of that. No experiment without our personal consent is appropriate and should never happen as per the Nuremberg Code. I mean, this is such simple common sense. And then you have the Legion, who represents the veterans, saying you can't join your own Remembrance Day unless you are jabbed by coercion or any means. It's a segregation. Right back to the world wars that they were supposedly fighting for. You need papers. You are the menace. You stop trying to get away. She's getting, Coco's getting all upset, just as she should be. I don't know what else to say. The common sense is lost, and the indoctrination, as she put it, for those soldiers that the veterans that did come out during when her speech started, and they were like, "Shame on you. This is not the place for it." But it is the place for it. It's the only place for it. What is Remembrance Day about? It's about preventing future catastrophes, future control. It's about preventing another world war. And then here you have slipping down that slippery slope like Mario sliding down into the toads, going right towards what they fought to prevent, to keep us safe, to keep us from having segregation. And we're like, you guys are garbage. These humans are garbage. Like the unvaccinated are garbage now in the eyes of some at that time because they were so indoctrinated by the propaganda. And the propaganda is in full swing right now, guys. And it was for the last few years. And it's not stopping. Some people understand now, they understand COVIDism. And I'm calling it COVIDism because it's an easy way to explain indoctrination of COVID. And so a lot of people now understand that this and that and this, and I still can't mention it on CensorTube because it's CensorTube. And if I mention it, the channel gets removed. And how obvious is that? That's censorship. Censorship and propaganda of false narratives. So, I don't know what else to say, but we're falling down this slippery slope. The government-funded media, CBC, government-funded Castanet, they're paying all these guys, and there's all the bankers, and they're all the owners at the end of Glacier Media who owns Castanet. They all have political motives and controls, and it is getting worse and worse year by year. We still can't believe Trudeau is still doing what he's doing. We still can't believe I watch videos of Biden, and if he doesn't have a teleprompter telling him what to say, he goes brain dead. I mean, how many of these do we see a week in Vietnam? He was just in Vietnam, and he couldn't even get a few words out that made any sense. The political war leaders are the ones that should be fighting, not the young soldiers who sign up to go to war because they think it's so great and they're so excited to go on an adventure. And they don't realize, it's like the smoking campaign back in the day. Smoking is awesome. Oh, now it's like, let's show a picture of your mouth falling apart on the cigarette pact. These young people are dying for the military-industrial complex and for the people running that, the bankers, the money, the power, the control. It never ends. Wars have always happened. If you don't remember the past, you're condemned to repeat it. Ernie Racing, Canadian journalist. Make sure you go on the Canadian Journalist and watch the full Remembrance Day, from start to finish, and make your own opinion about what happened that day. Cheers.